Rain tapping against my apartment window had turned into a kind of therapy for me. For 12 years now, it had been the one steady thing in my world, a soft, reliable rhythm that demanded nothing, questioned nothing, and expected absolutely nothing in return. I sat at the narrow desk tucked into the corner of my one-bedroom place in East Vancouver, the pale light from my laptop screen bouncing off my reading glasses. Friday afternoon meant 3 more tax returns to complete before I could call it a week. Mrs. Chen from the laundromat below, the Patels who owned the corner convenience store, Marcus, the Uber driver working his way through UBC. Modest files, straightforward numbers, decent, honest living. My fingers moved over the keyboard with the same careful accuracy they had once used to oversee billion-dollar investments. Some instincts never fade, even when the rest of your life does. The apartment held its usual stillness, broken only by the rain and the occasional groan of the aging radiator. No television humming in the background. No music filling the space. Over time, I'd come to value quiet. Silence didn't lie. It never tried to be more than it was. Then my phone vibrated against the desk. A Toronto number I didn't recognize. I nearly ignored it. Spam calls were common enough, but some faint pull made me pick it up. "Is this Thomas Brennan?" A woman's voice. Crisp, efficient, controlled. "Yes, Mr. Brennan. This is Patricia Holbrook from Ashford & Associates. I'm calling in regard to the estate of Margaret Brennan." My fingers froze above the keys. Margaret. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard her name spoken out loud. I'd made sure I didn't. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Brennan passed away on Tuesday. The funeral will be held tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. After the service, there will be a formal reading of the will at our office at 4 o'clock. A slight pause. "Your attendance is requested." Her words felt distant, as if they were traveling through water before reaching me. Margaret was gone. The woman I had loved beyond reason. The woman I had sacrificed everything for. The woman who had erased me from her life without a second glance. "Mr. Brennan? Are you still on the line?" "Yes, I'm here." My voice sounded unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. "Will you be attending?" Every rational thought told me to refuse. What place did I have at Margaret's funeral? I was the fallen ex-husband. The headline. The executive was accused of stealing from his own firm. I still remembered the articles. CFO Thomas Brennan, charged with embezzlement. They'd chosen the worst possible photo of me, the one where exhaustion made me look guilty, even though I wasn't. And yet, beneath the shame and the years of silence, something inside me stirred. A stubborn fragment of the man I used to insist I should go, that I owed her that much. "I'll be there," I said before I could change my mind. When the call ended, I remained motionless, watching rainwater slide down the glass in uneven trails. Toronto. I hadn't set foot in that city in 12 years. I hadn't seen my daughter, Victoria, in nearly as long. The last time I'd stood in a courtroom, she'd been there, face drained of color, as the judge delivered my sentence. She was 28 then, rising fast in the tech industry, building a name for herself. Now she would be 40, practically a stranger. I shut my laptop and crossed to the narrow closet where I kept my only decent suit, navy, slightly out of style but carefully preserved. I'd worn it to interviews that led nowhere, to mandatory meetings with probation officers, to the modest accounting office that eventually hired me to prepare tax returns for clients who paid in cash and preferred not to discuss history. I lifted the jacket, inspecting it for damage, moths, stains, any sign of neglect. It would pass. That night, sleep refused to come. My mind replayed the last time I saw Margaret. 3 months after sentencing, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and regret. She was recovering from the stress-induced heart attack that had almost taken her life. Victoria had been there too, standing beside the bed like a silent guardian. "You need to leave," she had said, her voice sharp and unyielding. "You've caused enough harm." Margaret didn't even face me when she said it. She turned her head toward the window, denying me so much as a final glance. That quiet dismissal cut deeper than any accusation ever could. I walked out without another word. Within a week I was on a bus headed west. Vancouver, as far from Toronto as a man could go without leaving the country. I rebuilt my life from ashes. No name, no network, no recommendations. Just a 60-year-old with a criminal conviction, trying to relearn what it meant to exist with dignity. The following morning, I boarded the earliest flight east, 6 hours above the clouds, staring at nothing, thinking too much. The woman seated beside me attempted polite conversation about visiting her grandchildren. I must have radiated something closed off, because eventually she gave up. Toronto's skyline had transformed, taller, brighter, glass towers multiplying like ambition itself. The driver who collected me from Pearson made cheerful remarks about the Raptors and soaring real estate prices. I responded where expected, though the words barely registered. I'd reserved a modest hotel room near the cemetery. No luxury, just somewhere to change and steady myself before facing what waited. At 1:30, I slipped into my navy suit, tightened my tie with hands that trembled only slightly, and hailed another cab to Mount Pleasant Cemetery. The drizzle had followed me across the country, a thin veil of mist that blurred the world into muted shades of gray. The turnout was larger than I'd anticipated. Margaret had transformed Brennan Technologies from a fragile startup into one of the country's most powerful tech companies. Naturally, they would come: directors, staff, investors, perhaps even a few politicians. I kept to the edge of the grounds, partially concealed behind a broad oak, observing from afar. Beneath a green canopy stood the gathered mourners. Victoria was at the front. Her hair was shorter now. She wore a tailored black dress and heels that projected authority, every inch the CEO she had grown into. Two sharply dressed men stood beside her, likely senior executives. The ceremony was concise. A minister spoke about impact and legacy. A representative from the company highlighted Margaret's innovation and leadership. Victoria remained composed throughout, her expression controlled, almost corporate. My daughter had mastered the art of concealment. I didn't step forward. I didn't let myself be noticed. When it ended and the crowd began drifting toward their vehicles, I turned away instead, collar raised against the damp air, hands buried in my pockets. Asiford and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass tower in the heart of the financial district. I reached the building ahead of time, another habit left over from the man I used to be, and stood in the lobby observing sharply dressed professionals weaving past with briefcases in hand, phones pressed to their ears. At 3:50, I stepped into the elevator and rode it up to the 28th floor. The receptionist glanced up as I approached her desk. Name? Thomas Brennan. A subtle shift crossed her face. A flicker, recognition, maybe judgment. It disappeared just as quickly. Conference room C. Down the corridor, 3rd door on your right. The room was a showcase of glass walls and polished chrome, overlooking downtown Toronto all the way to the lake. A long mahogany table stretched through the center, encircled by high-backed leather chairs. A handful of attendees were already seated, faces I vaguely remembered from Margaret's corporate circle. Their conversation faded the second I walked in. I chose a chair near the exit, deliberately separate from the cluster at the center. The leather felt rigid beneath me. Or perhaps the stiffness was mine. I rested my folded hands on the tabletop and waited. Victoria entered precisely at 4 o'clock. She carried herself with the same decisive confidence Margaret once commanded. Measured steps, controlled energy. She went straight to the head of the table, the place that had likely belonged to her mother during board meetings, and sat without acknowledging anyone. Then her gaze found me. For the briefest second, her expression faltered, eyes widening, color draining, and just as quickly, the armor returned, stronger than before. What are you doing here? Her voice sliced through the room. I was invited. I replied evenly. Mrs. Holbrook contacted me. This concerns family, she shot back. You forfeited that when you stole from Mom's company. Several people shifted in their seats, discomfort thickening the air. I kept my posture steady, my tone level. I'm here because I was asked to attend. Victoria's jaw tightened, words gathering behind it, and then the door opened, and Patricia Holbrook stepped inside. She looked younger than I'd imagined from her voice, mid-40s perhaps, with streaks of gray in her hair, neatly twisted into a bun, and thin-framed glasses resting on her nose. A leather portfolio was tucked under her arm, and she carried herself with calm, practiced authority. Good afternoon, thank you all for being here. I'm Patricia Holbrook, senior partner at Ashford & Associates. For the past 15 years, I've served as Mrs. Brennan's estate attorney. She took a seat at the table, deliberately placing herself between Victoria and me. I understand this is a difficult day, so I'll proceed as efficiently as possible. From her portfolio, she removed a substantial document bound in dark blue, the last will and testament of Margaret Elizabeth Brennan, dated March 15, 2024. Victoria leaned back, her posture easing into something that resembled expectation, almost entitlement. I knew that expression. I had seen it years ago when she won her first major corporate case before moving into executive leadership. Confidence layered with the quiet belief that outcomes would naturally favor her. Before I addressed the individual bequests, Mrs. Holbrook continued. Mrs. Brennan requested that her personal statement be read in full. She adjusted her glasses and began, her tone steady and professional. To those present, if you are hearing this, I am no longer among you, and it is time certain truths come to light. I have carried many regrets, but none heavier than my silence. I built a company. I created an opportunity. I accumulated wealth. Those achievements once felt paramount. But in protecting my business, I ruined a good man's life, and I allowed my daughter to grow up believing a lie because the truth was inconvenient. This document is my attempt, however insufficient, to correct that wrong. The air in the room shifted. Conversation ceased entirely. Victoria's confidence dissolved into visible confusion. Mrs. Holbrook continued. Thomas Brennan did not embezzle funds from Brennan Technologies. I know this because I did. The statement seemed to linger, suspended like smoke. A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere down the table. Victoria's complexion was drained of color. In 2012, Mrs. Holbrook read on. Our company stood at the brink of financial ruin. We had stretched ourselves too thin, across 3 large contracts. Mrs. Holbrook read, her voice unwavering. Our liquidity was dangerously low. I chose to move money from the company pension funds. Temporarily, I told myself to stabilize operations. It was unlawful, it was unethical, and it was entirely my decision. Thomas uncovered the discrepancy during a standard audit. He confronted me and said he would report it. I pleaded with him, not for my own protection, but for Victoria's. She had only just joined the firm. A public scandal would have ended her career before it began. Thomas loved his daughter beyond reason, so he proposed a solution. He would accept blame for the missing funds. He would confess to embezzlement for personal gain. In return, I would safeguard Victoria's future within the company, prepare her to one day assume leadership, and shield her from the consequences. I agreed. I allowed him to take the fall. His name, his profession, his freedom. I convinced myself it was for Victoria, for the business, for the employees whose livelihoods depended on us. But the truth is simpler. It was cowardice. Thomas served time for crimes I committed. He forfeited his license, his career, his marriage, and I remained silent. The foundation of my success was built upon his sacrifice. Mrs. Holbrook paused, lifting the glass beside her for a measured sip of water. Victoria sat rigid, fingers clamped around the table's edge, her knuckles drained of color. The others in the room were no longer stealing glances at me. Their attention had shifted entirely to her. I do not ask for forgiveness, Mrs. Holbrook continued. There can be none for this, but the truth must stand on its own. Thomas Brennan is innocent of every accusation brought against him. His only fault was loving his daughter beyond measure. Consider this document my confession, and the only reparation I can offer. She lowered the page she had just finished, and turned to the next. Now we will address the individual bequests. Mrs. Holbrook's tone shifted back to formal precision. To my executive team at Brennan Technologies, David Chen, Susan Martinez, and Robert Liu, I leave a combined bonus of $5 million, to be divided equally in acknowledgement of your loyalty and years of service. She moved methodically through the document. Substantial donations to charitable foundations, endowed scholarships established in her parents' names. The company penthouse was awarded to David Chen, who had evidently served as Margaret's right hand for years, and to my daughter, Victoria Elizabeth Brennan. Victoria's spine straightened, her gaze locking onto the attorney. Victoria, you are both my proudest accomplishment and my deepest regret. I provided you with opportunity, privilege, and every possible advantage, but I also taught you the wrong lessons, that achievement matters more than integrity, that image outweighs truth. For that I ask for your forgiveness. A faint tremor passed through Victoria's jaw. I leave you the sum of $25, $1 for each year you have worked at Brennan Technologies with this message. Wealth unearned corrupts, authority untested destruction. Begin again as your father once did, and perhaps you will grow into the person you were meant to become. The silence that followed was suffocating. Color drained from Victoria's face until it turned a lifeless gray. Her lips parted as if to protest, then pressed together again. No sound emerged. The remainder of my estate, Mrs. Holbrook continued evenly, including all shares in Brennan Technologies, all real estate holdings, all investment portfolios, intellectual property rights, and any additional assets valued at approximately $185 million. I leave to my former husband, Thomas Brennan, the only truly honorable man I have ever known. The reaction was immediate, muted, restrained in that distinctly Canadian way, but undeniable. A ripple of shocked murmurs. Chairs shifting against the floor, heads turning toward me. I remained motionless, hands still folded before me. I felt nothing. Or perhaps the weight of it all was so immense that sensation itself shut down. There is more, Mrs. Holbrook said, lifting her voice just enough to regain control of the room. The whispers faded. Mrs. Brennan left additional instructions. Mr. Brennan, this next item is for you specifically. From her portfolio, Mrs. Holbrook removed a smaller envelope, cream-colored, sealed with dark wax, and gently pushed it across the table toward me. My name was written on the front in Margaret's unmistakable script, sharp and deliberate, every letter firm and controlled. She requested that you read this in private, Mrs. Holbrook said. The remaining matters concern administration of the estate, which I'll outline now, she continued, detailing trusts, tax structures, asset transfers, but her words blurred into background noise. My attention was fixed on the envelope, on Margaret's handwriting, on the memory of her hand moving steadily across a page. When had she written it? How long had she carried those thoughts, waiting for the moment they could finally be heard? Victoria shot to her feet, the legs of her chair scraping harshly against the floor. This is absurd. She wasn't thinking clearly. I'll challenge it. Mrs. Brennan underwent evaluations by 3 independent physicians in the months prior to her passing. Mrs. Holbrook replied evenly. Each confirmed she was fully competent when she signed this will. She anticipated objections and took every necessary legal safeguard. The document is airtight. He stole from us. Victoria's voice cracked, losing its executive composure. She pointed at me, her hand trembling. He confessed. He went to prison. He accepted a plea agreement to protect you. Miss Holbrook said quietly, as your mother has just explained. No. Victoria shook her head, strands of hair slipping loose from her carefully arranged bun. No, that's not. He wouldn't. Then she looked at me, truly looked at me. Her eyes moved over the navy suit that had seen better days, the scuffed shoes, the creases etched into my face, the gray threaded through my hair. I could almost see the calculation behind her stare, the effort to reconcile the man sitting before her with the villain she had constructed in her memory for over a decade. The thief, the traitor, the greedy father who had wrecked everything for cash. Did you? She asked softly, her voice unsteady. Did you really take the blame for her? I held her gaze, Margaret's eyes staring back at me in a younger face, and gave a single nod. Yes. But why? Her voice cracked. Why would you do that? Because you were my daughter, I answered, and I loved you. The past tense settled heavily between us, because I had loved her. Once. The little girl I'd pushed on playground swings. The child who sat at the kitchen table doing math homework while I explained fractions. The brave 8-year-old wobbled down the sidewalk on her first bicycle while I ran behind her, ready to catch her if she fell. That child no longer existed. The woman in front of me, shaking with anger and disbelief, felt like someone I had never met. Her expression broke. Just for a heartbeat, I glimpsed the girl she used to be, uncertain, frightened, searching for something solid to hold on to. Then she turned abruptly and strode out of the conference room, heels striking the marble in sharp, rapid beats. The door shut behind her with a muted click. The remaining executives began collecting their belongings, offering subdued condolences and awkward farewells. One by one they filtered out until the room stood quiet again. Only Mrs. Holbrook and I remained. "Well," she said lightly, allowing herself a faint smile. "That was more eventful than most readings, though perhaps not more than Mrs. Brennan anticipated." She did appreciate precise timing. "She always did," I replied. Mrs. Holbrook organized her documents into neat stacks. "I'll need you back next week to sign the necessary paperwork. Transferring an estate of this size requires considerable administration. I can imagine." She studied me for a moment. "You don't appear shocked or pleased. Many people in your position would be." "Most people in my position," I said quietly, "would never have found themselves here to begin with." Her next smile carried more warmth than before. "Mrs. Brennan expected you'd respond like this," she said gently. "She believed you'd want to give most of it away." A faint breath left me. "She always understood me." "She loved you," Mrs. Holbrook added. "Even after everything, perhaps because of it." She closed her portfolio with a soft snap. "I'll give you privacy to read her letter. There's no rush, the room is booked for another hour." When she left, the silence returned. I remained seated in that sleek glass and chrome space, watching dusk settle over Toronto. The skyline glowed in fading light. This city had once been my whole world: career, marriage, fatherhood. Now it felt like a place I had dreamed about long ago, the details scattered and unreachable. The envelope rested in my hands, heavier than paper should be. For a moment I considered leaving it unopened, keeping Margaret's voice where it had been for 12 years, silent, safe. But I broke the wax seal. The letter inside was written in her familiar, deliberate script, dated 3 months before she died. "Dear Thomas, if this letter has reached you, then at last I am free from the cowardice that shaped my life. I wish I could pretend that freedom brings peace, but the dead are not comforted. They are only quiet. This is not an apology. No collection of words could repair what I took from you. Think of this instead as a confession, a record, my final reckoning. 14 months ago, I learned I was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors offered 6 months. I forced it into 14 through stubbornness and the finest treatment money could secure. But wealth has boundaries. I have reached them. When I was told, my first emotion was not fear. It was a relief. Not because death is gentle. It is not, Thomas. No matter how full a life you've lived, but because I finally had a reason to tell the truth. What was a corporation in the face of mortality? What was reputation compared to standing before whatever comes next with an honest soul? And yet, even then, I was delayed. I convinced myself I needed time to organize the company's succession, to safeguard Victoria, to put affairs in order. Excuses. Every one of them. The truth is, even with death standing at my shoulder, I remained a coward. It was Victoria who finally forced my hand. 3 months ago, she came to me brimming with excitement about expanding Brennan Technologies into artificial intelligence. She laid out her proposal: market analysis, financial forecasts, growth strategy. It was exceptional. She has always been exceptional. But as I listened, I felt the absence of something essential. What happens if this technology is misused? I asked her. What if it causes harm? She didn't hesitate. That's not our responsibility. We can't control how others use what we build. And in that instant, I recognized my own voice in hers. I had taught her that outcome matters more than ethics, that profit outweighs the consequence, that business operates beyond morality, and victory excuses collateral damage. I taught her not through lectures but through silence, by allowing you to carry my crime, by letting her believe you were weak, that you stole because you lacked the strength to succeed honestly. She absorbed the lesson I modeled. Be decisive. Be ruthless. Never allow emotion to interfere with ambition. I did not create a monster named Victoria. She is still capable of compassion, of integrity, but the version of her I cultivated, the one trained to follow my example without question, that version is something I barely recognize, and the fault is mine. This will is not an act of generosity. It is penance. It is design. It is my final attempt to become the mother she should have had, even if she despises me for it. The money I've left you, I understand you will not keep most of it. You were never driven by wealth. Give it away if you must. That is who you are. But I am also entrusting you with Brennan Technologies, and here I ask something in return. Do not dismantle it. Do not carve it up or let it collapse. 3,000 people depend on that company for their livelihoods. It offers medical benefits, retirement security, and real livelihoods. The employees tied to it had nothing to do with my wrongdoing or yours. They shouldn't pay the price for a battle we created within ourselves. And please don't hand it to Victoria yet. Not now. Not until she's proven she deserves it. Not until she truly grasps what responsibility and leadership demand. If you're able, take control of it. If you're not, appoint someone capable who can. Organize it in whatever way makes sense to you. Just promise me this, Thomas, turn it into something worthy of being passed down. Build a place where character counts, where people are valued, where achievement isn't defined only by numbers on a spreadsheet. Shape it into what it was always meant to become. And if one day Victoria grows into the woman she was meant to be, the woman I failed to guide her to become, then place it in her hands, but only then. That's all I'm asking. I've enclosed proof of everything I did. Bank records, private emails, internal notes, documents that lay out my guilt in black and white. If you choose, give them to the authorities. Clear your name the right way. You deserve that vindication. Or keep them sealed and let the truth remain buried in this will. The decision is yours. I don't know what waits for us after this life, Thomas. I don't know whether judgment follows death, but if it does, and if I must answer for my actions, I hope whoever stands in judgment sees that I loved our daughter. I loved her so fiercely that I destroyed an honorable man trying to shield her. That love was selfish. That love was weak. That love left wounds that can't be undone. Still, it was love. I am sorry. I know that apology is painfully insufficient. Sorry, cannot return the 12 years I stole from you. Sorry, I cannot repair your name. Sorry, cannot mend what was broken between you and Victoria. It's only a word, but it's the last thing I have to offer. Along with money you never wanted, and a company you never sought. Do better with them than I ever did. Margaret. I went through the letter 3 separate times before sliding it back into its envelope with deliberate care. My fingers were steady. There were no tears clouding my vision. Instead, an odd sense of stillness settled over me, as if I'd walked the entire length of a grueling road, only to discover there was nothing waiting at the finish line but empty space. Margaret was gone. The truth had surfaced. Victoria now knew everything, what I had done, what her mother had done, and somehow, unbelievably, I was a wealthy man beyond imagination. Yet none of it seemed solid or real. I rose from my chair, envelope in hand, and crossed to the window. Night had fully claimed the sky, and the lights of Toronto shimmered below like fallen constellations scattered across the streets. Somewhere out there lived the little girl I used to push on playground swings, the daughter I sacrificed my freedom for, the stranger who had walked out of this very room an hour earlier with her reality in pieces. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt justified. I should have felt anything other than this overwhelming, hollow exhaustion. But exhaustion was all there was. The following week dissolved into a haze of signatures, meetings, and endless consultations. Lawyers, accountants, documents stacked higher than reason. Mrs. Holbrook moved swiftly. Within 5 days, the accounts were accessible, holding more money than I could possibly exhaust in 10 lifetimes. By the 7th day, I controlled a majority share in Brennan Technologies, and a board meeting had been arranged to present me as its new owner. Victoria didn't reach out. Neither did I. We circled one another like twin stars locked in orbit. Too much shared past to crash together. Too much pull to drift apart. On Thursday, I faced the executive team at Brennan Technologies. They were courteous, composed, and unmistakably uneasy. The former CFO, branded as corrupt, was now seated at the head of their table. The man once accused of siphoning company funds now held the controlling interest. It didn't matter that Margaret's will had absolved me. People cling to the version of events that suits them, and the story told 12 years ago was easier to accept than the truth. I'm not here to manage daily operations, I told them. Standing in the conference room that had once been Margaret's command center, I lack both the expertise and the inclination for that role. What I am here to do is make certain this company operates with integrity. Mrs. Holbrook would oversee the introduction of strict compliance measures, quarterly independent audits, mandatory ethics training for every executive, and a protected whistleblower system reporting directly to the board. A board I would now be chairing. David Chen, Margaret's longtime deputy, shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. And the daily operations? He asked carefully. Who's stepping in as CEO? You are, I replied without hesitation. Interim CEO, subject to board confirmation. You've been carrying the weight of this role in everything but the title for the last 5 years. It's time the title matched the work. A visible wave of relief passed over his face. Then he hesitated again. And Victoria? She's been outspoken about disputing the will. She's already trying to rally board members to question your controlling stake. I offered a thin smile that stopped short of my eyes. She's welcome to try. The will is airtight. And Victoria needs to understand something her mother never managed to teach her. And what's that? That not every fight deserves to be won. When the meeting adjourned, I wandered through the corridors of the company. My company now, a reality that still felt abstract. Conversations dropped to murmurs as I passed. A few faces held curiosity, others carried quiet resentment. None showed enthusiasm. I wasn't naive enough to expect applause. Eventually, I found myself on the top floor, standing inside what had once been Margaret's office. The room had been stripped of anything personal. No framed photographs, no awards, no lingering traces of identity. Only the faint scent of her perfume clung stubbornly to the heavy curtains. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline of Toronto below. I moved to the exact spot where she must have stood countless times, surveying the empire she built. Has she ever doubted herself, even for a moment? Or had she rewritten the story in her mind until betrayal felt necessary? Even righteous, the unavoidable price of ambition. Liar number. Can we talk? V. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Just 2 words, and a single initial. After 12 years of silence, my daughter was reaching out, asking for something she had never once needed to request before my time. My focus, my willingness to truly listen. I could have ignored it. I could have let her sit alone with her anger and confusion, just as I had sat alone with mine. I could have made her taste even a sliver of what I endured. Those endless nights in a prison cell, aware that my own daughter believed I was a thief. But spite was never something I wore well, and truthfully, I was exhausted. Exhausted from resentment, from bitterness, from carrying the weight of it all. I didn't want to carry anything anymore. I typed a reply. Saturday, 10 a.m. Van Hoot on Queen Street. Her answer came within seconds. I'll be there. Saturday dawned crisp and bright. One of those autumn mornings where the sunlight looks generous but gives nothing back. I reached the cafe early, ordered a black coffee, and chose a seat by the window. Victoria walked in precisely at 10. She'd always been punctual, but she seemed different now. Less imposing, less composed, smaller, somehow. Her hair was tied back in a plain ponytail, and instead of the tailored suits she favored, she wore jeans and a soft sweater. She saw me, paused briefly, then approached with the measured caution of someone stepping through danger. Hi, she said quietly. Hi, can I sit? I nodded toward the chair opposite mine. She lowered herself into it, ordered a latte as a server passed, and folded her hands neatly on the table, a gesture so familiar it caught at my chest. It was my own habit reflected back at me. For several long seconds we simply studied each other. I searched her features for the child I once knew. She was still there, beneath the years and the wounds and the armor life had layered over her, altered but unmistakable. I don't know where to begin, Victoria admitted at last. The beginning usually works. A faint smile touched her lips, a shadow of the effortless humor we once shared. Which beginning? There are so many versions of this story now, I don't even know which one is real. The real one, I said softly. That's always the safest place to start. She drew in a steady breath. I remember you as the best dad in the world. You never missed a single one of my soccer matches. You stayed up late helping me build that ridiculous volcano for the science fair. You ran behind me while I learned to ride my bike and told me being afraid was normal but quitting wasn't. You made me believe I was capable of anything. You were, I said gently, and you proved it. And then overnight, you were a criminal. Her voice tightened. Mom said you'd been siphoning money from the company for years. She said you betrayed us. Betrayed everyone. She showed me bank records, wire transfers and documents. She told me you'd admitted it. I didn't want to accept it, but there it was. Your confession, your guilty plea, prison. I remember. I was furious and confused. I kept thinking, how could he throw it all away for cash? We weren't struggling. We had more than enough. What was missing? She paused, swallowing against the emotion rising in her throat. I convinced myself you must have loved money more than you loved us. The server placed her latte in front of her. She cupped it in both hands but made no move to drink. Then Mom died. She continued quietly. And there was the will. The letter. And suddenly the entire story flipped. You didn't steal anything. You gave up everything for me. To protect my position, my future. And I spent 12 years despising you for it. You couldn't have known, I said softly. Your mother made certain of that. But I should have questioned it. I should have doubted. I should have... Her voice fractured. You were my father. I should have trusted you. You were 28, I reminded her. Your mother wasn't just your parent. She was your role model, your employer, your guide. She presented evidence and told you I was guilty. What alternative did you have? The truth. She looked up at me, eyes shining. I should have believed the truth. The truth was buried, I said. She made sure it stayed that way. Her jaw tightened. I hate her for it. I hate that she deceived me. I hate that she let you rot in prison. I hate that she built everything on your sacrifice and never told me. And I hate that she's gone, because now I can't even confront her. She was terminal when she finalized that will, I replied. She had time to back out, to leave things as they were, to protect her reputation. She chose not to. That required some measure of courage, maybe not enough, maybe far too late, but it was something. Victoria brushed at her tears with the back of her hand, a movement so unguarded, it made her look achingly young. I tried to fight the will, she admitted. Did you know? David mentioned it. I hired 3 separate firms. All of them told me the same thing. It's ironclad. Mom made sure of that too, so I can't challenge it. I can't even pretend I have grounds. I'm just finished. The CEO role I spent 12 years earning? Gone. The inheritance I assumed was mine? Gone. The mother I thought I understood never really existed, and the father I resented all these years was innocent. She gave a hollow laugh. My entire foundation was a lie. She stared into her untouched drink. $25. That's what I received. $1 for every year I worked at a company built on deception and your sacrifice. It's almost artistic in a cruel way. She wanted you to rebuild, I said quietly. She wanted you to understand the difference between building something and simply receiving it, I said. Maybe it was meant as punishment, or maybe in her own flawed way, she was trying to rescue you. Victoria studied me, then really studied me. Her expression unguarded, almost fragile. What do you want, Dad? You have it all now. The money, the company, control. You could ruin me if you chose to. You could make sure I never work in tech again. You could expose everything Mom did, everything I didn't know. I don't want revenge, Victoria. Then what? What is it you actually want? It was a fair question. For 12 years, I had disciplined myself not to want anything at all. I'd learned to live quietly, to need almost nothing, to expect even less. And now that I had more than I'd ever imagined, I still didn't have an answer ready. I want you to be all right, I said at last. I want you to learn what your mother never fully understood. That character outweighs achievement. That identity matters more than assets. That some costs are simply too high, no matter what you're trying to buy. She shook her head faintly. How am I supposed to learn that at 40? I don't even know who I am outside of who Mom shaped me to be. Then start discovering it. Strip away the titles, the legacy, the expectations. Figure out who Victoria Brennan is without Margaret Brennan's shadow, or Thomas Brennan's history, or the label of CEO, just Victoria. I wouldn't know where to begin. Neither did I admitted. 12 years ago, I walked out of prison with a record. No career, no savings, no future. I had to relearn how to exist from the ground up. Some days were brutal. Some days felt impossible. But I managed. How? By accepting that the old life was over. That chasing it would only poison whatever future I had left. I started valuing small, honest things. Mrs. Chen thanked me for saving her $40 on her tax return. The Patels invited me to their daughter's wedding. Marcus sent me a photo when he graduated from University of British Columbia. Modest moments. Genuine ones. The kind that don't look impressive on paper but feel real. Tears streamed down her face now, and she didn't bother hiding them. I don't know if I'm capable of that. You are. You're stronger than you believe. I'm really not. You walked in here today, I reminded her. That required strength. She gave a watery smile. Or desperation. Sometimes they're indistinguishable. We let the silence stretch between us, watching the movement outside the cafe window. A young couple strolling hand in hand, an elderly man scattering crumbs to pigeons despite the posted warning, a little girl darting after a balloon slipping higher into the air. Life unfolding, indifferent to our revelations. "What are you going to do with the company?" she asked eventually. "Keep it stable. Make sure it operates with integrity. Try to turn it into something that deserves to be passed down. And after that, maybe one day I'll hand it back to you." Her eyes lifted. "Really? If you earn it. If you grow into someone who can lead with principle instead of pure ambition." She considered that, then nodded. "That's fair. Your mother left you $25, I said evenly. "But I'm offering you something else. An entry-level position. Administrative assistant in the Ethics and Compliance Department. Minimum wage," I continued. "No privileges, no shortcuts to the executive floor, no special considerations, just work." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're serious? It's yours if you want it, but only if you're prepared to begin at the bottom and climb honestly. Only if you can take direction from people who once answered you. Only if you can learn to respect the work more than the title attached to it." That's humiliating. Yes. Everyone will know. Yes. They'll talk. They'll laugh. Probably. She stared at me. "Why would you put me through that?" "I'm not putting you through anything. I'm offering you the space to choose it. Your mothers will dismantle the future you assumed was yours. This is a chance to construct one that's stronger. But it has to be your decision. No pressure. No deadlines. The offer stays open." She looked down at her untouched latte, watching the foam dissolve into uneven swirls. "I need time. Take it." She rose slowly, slipping into her coat, lifting her purse from the chair. Then she paused. "Dad? Yes? I'm sorry, for doubting you, for the years we lost, for all of it." I stood as well, the small cafe table between us, suddenly feeling insignificant. "I'm sorry too, for the weight you carried, for the lies you were handed, for not being there to guide you into the person you could have become." She hesitated. "Can we try again? Not pretend we can go back. That's impossible. But start from where we are now?" I considered the question carefully. Whether forgiveness could truly take root, whether trust could be rebuilt brick by brick, whether 12 silent years could be crossed by intention alone. "We can try," I said at last. This time her smile was real, small, but unguarded. "That's enough." And maybe it was. She disappeared into the Saturday crowd, swallowed by the rhythm of the city. I remained where I was, finishing my coffee and watching life continue beyond the glass. Toronto. The city I had once fled in shame, the city I had returned to expecting only ghosts. Instead, I found something unfamiliar. Not restoration, not victory, but possibility. Margaret's letter rested folded inside my wallet. Her confession, her attempt at atonement, her request that I do better with her fortune than she ever had. The company she built through deception and sacrifice now sat in my hands, waiting to be reshaped or dismantled. Somewhere in the streets below, Victoria was walking, trying to understand who she was without the story she'd been told her entire life. The position I'd offered her wasn't a gift, it was a doorway. Whether she stepped through it would define more than her resume. It would define her character. And then there was me, Thomas Brennan, 63, former CFO, former inmate, small business tax preparer, and now, improbably, steward of a $185 million empire. What would I do with it? The answer came gradually, like morning light pushing back darkness. I would honor Margaret's final request, keep the company alive, cleanse it of corruption, make it worthy of being passed on, but I would go further. I would use the wealth to create the very opportunities I'd once prayed for: scholarships for those carrying criminal records, job training for men and women re-entering society after prison, rehabilitation initiatives, legal support for people who couldn't afford proper defense, the second chances I never had. Brennan Technologies would become a testing ground, not a throne for Victoria, but a place where she could prove herself, a place where leadership would be measured by integrity, not ambition, where what was lost could only be reclaimed through effort. As for me, I would keep my modest apartment in Vancouver. I would keep my small accounting practice. That quiet life had been earned the hard way. It was chosen. It was honest. It belonged to me in a way inherited wealth never could. The first paycheck I might someday sign for Victoria would matter more than any inheritance. It would represent the first dollar she earned free of her mother's shadow and my sacrifice. Perhaps in time she would understand that. Or perhaps she wouldn't. She might refuse the offer, walk away from the opportunity. Deciding starting over was too steep a climb. That would sting, but it would be hers to decide her life, her missteps, her direction. I couldn't rescue her from herself any more than Margaret had been able to rescue me from my own decisions, or than I had been able to rescue Margaret from hers. In the end, we each travel alone. We choose, we act, we accept the consequences. All I could do was offer her a compass, a place to begin, a single steady first step. The rest would belong to her. I rose from my chair, placed cash on the table with a generous tip, and stepped out into the crisp autumn light. The air cut clean and cold across my face. Toronto carried its familiar scent: exhaust fumes, roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart, and something else too: possibility. My flight back to Vancouver left that evening. Mrs. Chen was waiting on her completed tax return. The Patels needed guidance about incorporating their company. Marcus had questions about auto loan rates and repayment terms. Small matters, honest ones, the kind that anchors a life. But there was one final place I needed to visit first. Mount Pleasant Cemetery lay hushed under the afternoon sky. Only the wind, the faint hum of traffic beyond the gates, and the soft rhythm of my shoes against the gravel accompanied me. I located Margaret's grave without difficulty. The soil was still new, the flowers are still fresh. A simple granite marker bore her name, her dates, and beneath them the words, "She built empires but forgot to build herself." I stood there for a long while, hands buried in my coat pockets, studying the stone. There had once been so much I might have said: anger, blame, regret, endless what-ifs. Now the words felt weightless, unnecessary, directed toward someone who could no longer hear them. "I'll look after the company," I said at last, my voice barely rising above the wind, "and I'll look after Victoria if she allows me to. That's the only promise I can make." The breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the hint of distant rain. I lingered as though expecting an answer, some confirmation from the universe that I was choosing the right path. None came, only silence, and perhaps that was answer enough. Eventually, I turned and walked toward the cemetery gates, toward the taxi that would carry me to the airport, toward the modest apartment in Vancouver where my life simple, earned, authentic waited for me. Behind me, Margaret's grave remained still in the pale sunlight, guarding secrets that no longer held power, truths finally spoken, and a legacy I would spend the rest of my years trying to repair. Not for her, not even for Victoria, for myself. Because when everything is stripped away, betrayal and sacrifice, prison walls and silent years, sudden wealth and long-buried truths, what remains isn't what you possessed, what you lost, or who hurt you. What remains is the person you decide to be when the lies crumble and you're left alone with your conscience and the next choice waiting in front of you. I chose integrity. I chose redemption. I chose to believe in second chances, that Victoria could grow into someone stronger than Margaret ever allowed herself to be, that I could turn fortune into something constructive instead of corrosive. Maybe that was naive. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe 12 years of living quietly had dulled whatever edge I once had, leaving me unprepared for the ruthless world I was re-entering. But those 12 years had taught me something more valuable than sharpness. They taught me how to be human again. They taught me to treasure simplicity, to see worth in honesty, to find peace in releasing resentment. I wasn't about to abandon those lessons now. The taxi driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror and asked for my destination. I gave him the address of the airport, leaned back, and watched Toronto recede behind us, glass towers catching the light, traffic crawling through intersections, pedestrians weaving past one another without meeting eyes. My phone vibrated, a message from Victoria. I've been thinking about the job offer. Can I take the weekend to decide? I replied, take all the time you need. The offer stands. 3 dots appeared. Vanished. Reappeared. Disappeared again. Finally, her message arrived. Thank you. For the sacrifice. For the opportunity. For being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us deserve anything. I typed back. We just receive what we're given and try to make something meaningful out of it. The typing dots surfaced once more. I'll call you Monday. I'll answer. I slipped the phone into my pocket and watched the skyline fade into suburbs, the suburbs into open fields. The city loosened its grip, replaced by stretches of farmland and wide sky. Can I have the weekend to decide? I typed back. Take as long as you need. The offer doesn't expire. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, her message came through. Thank you for everything. For the sacrifice. For the chance. For being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us deserve anything. I wrote back. We just get what we get, and try to do something worthwhile with it. The dots blinked one last time. Then I'll call you Monday. You'll answer. I slipped my phone into my pocket and watched the suburbs fade into farmland, then into the industrial sprawl near the airport. In a few hours, I'd be back in Vancouver, back in my small apartment with rain streaking the windows and the old radiator clanking through the night, back to Mrs. Chen's tax filings, the Patel's business questions, Marcus's endless concerns about car loans and interest rates, back to the life I knew. Except it wasn't quite the same life anymore. Now it came with a $185 million responsibility, a company that needed reshaping, a daughter who needed steady ground beneath her feet. It wasn't the ending I expected when Patricia Holbrook first called about Margaret's death. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen. But it was mine, my story, my decision, and maybe that was enough. The plane lifted into a sky brushed with pink and gold, carrying me west toward mountains, toward ocean, toward whatever waited next. Below, Toronto shrank to a scattering of lights, then to nothing. Just another city full of secrets, full of people wondering who they were meant to become, and whether redemption was possible after everything fell apart. I hoped it was, for Victoria, for me, for anyone carrying the weight of regret and choice. Because in 12 years of exile and sacrifice and starting over, I learned one thing above all else. The story isn't over until you stop trying. Not until you surrender. Not until you let your failures define you instead of shape you. Margaret's chapter had ended. But mine hadn't. Victoria's hadn't. No one does. As long as there is breath left and courage enough to try one more time. That was the real inheritance she left behind. Not the money, not the company. But the truth is that it's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to make amends. Never too late to become who you were meant to be. Even if it takes loss to understand it. Even if it takes 12 years. Even if it costs $185 million to finally set things right. The plane climbed higher, chasing the sun toward the coastline and the small apartment where my simple, honest life waited. I didn't know exactly how I would reconcile who I'd been, who I'd become, and who I now needed to be. It wouldn't be easy, but the things that matter never are. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing to A Father's Wrath and turning on the notification bell. Every week, we share powerful stories about redemption, hard choices, accountability, and the courage it takes to start again. Leave a comment below. Do you believe redemption is possible after everything falls apart? Your perspective might be the hope someone else needs tonight. Thank you for reading. Keep going. The story isn't finished yet.